Some people wear a smile like a mask they never take off, and for 2 years I was one of them. My name is Claire Donovan, and my neighbors in our polished Charlotte high-rise thought I was the luckiest woman in the building. What they never saw was the long-sleeve cardigan I wore in 90-degree heat to hide the bruises underneath. What none of us saw coming was that the one person who could finally see through the lie was flying home after 15 years away, with absolutely no idea he was about to walk straight into it. If stories like this keep you glued to the screen, hit subscribe on the Revenge Tales right now, because this one does not let up until the very end. I grew up outside Asheville in a small mountain town that felt safer than anywhere I have lived since. The brightest part of my childhood was my Uncle Weston, my mother's younger brother, 14 years older than me, and basically a superhero to a little girl. He fixed bikes for the whole block, taught me to swim in the river, and never once broke a promise. When I turned 14, he took an overseas contract building turbine rigs, and what was supposed to be 2 years turned into 15. Our calls fading from weekly to a handful of texts a year. I grew up, went to college for finance, and eventually met a man named Trevor Langston at a networking mixer downtown. He was confident, polished, and impossibly attentive, remembering tiny details about me that most people forget within minutes. My mother met him once and told me afterward that Trevor felt too smooth, like a stone polished so perfectly you could not tell what was underneath. I laughed it off and married him within the year, while Uncle Weston, stuck overseas, could only call and promise to vet him properly once he made it home. The first 2 years were good enough that I chose not to notice the small cruelties creeping in, the snapping at waiters, the humiliation in front of friends over a tiny mistake. Slowly, my friends disappeared from my life, each one framed as a bad influence, until my entire world had shrunk down to my parents and him. I told myself a controlling husband was normal, even though the old me had once stood up to a professor and refused to back down from a corrupt manager. A strong woman does not surrender all at once. She gets worn down in stages until she cannot tell abuse from affection anymore. The first time Trevor hit me was after a holiday party, when he accused me of flirting with a coworker who had only been asking about spreadsheet software. He slapped me so hard I hit the wall, then dropped to his knees sobbing, swearing he did not recognize himself and it would never happen again. I forgave him, and for 3 months he was perfect again, until it happened a second time, then a third, each cycle of calm growing shorter than the last. The excuses for my bruises became rehearsed, and in public, Trevor remained the charming, doting husband everyone envied, which made the whole thing feel unbelievable even to me. By our 5th year of marriage, I had learned to read the sound of his footsteps in the hallway, bracing myself before he even opened the door. I was not a broken woman who had given up. I was quietly calculating my exit, researching divorce laws late at night, and hiding $20 bills in an old coffee tin in the pantry. What kept me frozen was fear. Fear that I could not survive financially since Trevor had pushed me into a lower-paying job, and fear that no one would take my word over his charm. Then one afternoon, my mother called with news that changed everything. Uncle Weston had finished his final contract overseas and was finally coming home for good. Something in me cracked open at the sound of it. A small, forgotten warmth flooding back in. The memory of a man who always kept his promises. In the weeks before his return, Trevor grew strange and tense in a new way, glued to his phone, sliding onto the balcony to take calls I was not meant to hear. One night, I caught a glimpse of a banking app notification on his unlocked phone showing a staggering overdue balance, and when he caught me looking, he grabbed my wrist so hard it left a bruise and hissed at me to mind my own business. 3 days before my uncle's flight landed, Trevor exploded over something as small as the wrong brand of coffee, then shoved me hard into the corner of the kitchen island, leaving a bruise that spread dark across my ribs. The next morning, I studied a map of pain across my body that no staircase could explain, and that same day, my mother called to remind me we were all driving to the airport in 2 days to welcome Weston home. Staring at my reflection, I finally texted my mother the truth I had buried for 2 years, telling her I needed to talk in person. At my parents' house 2 days later, my mother spotted the bruise on my wrist the moment my sleeve slipped, and her face turned to stone as she demanded the truth. I sobbed for the first time in months, finally saying out loud everything I had swallowed for 2 years, and when I finished, she asked only one question: "What are you going to do now?" I told her I wanted a divorce, but had no idea how to do it safely with no money and no name on the condo, and she promised we would figure it out together, especially with Weston finally coming home to help. The airport reunion was everything I remembered. Until Weston's hands paused on my back and he pulled away just far enough to study me with the same sharp eyes he once used to diagnose a broken engine. He noticed I was too thin, and when my sleeve rode up, revealing the fading edge of a bruise, I saw suspicion flicker across his face before I yanked the fabric back down. That night he insisted on riding home with me to finally meet Trevor properly, and I could not find a polite way to say no. Trevor turned on the full performance the moment we walked in, pouring expensive scotch and playing the gracious host, while Weston sat back collecting evidence one detail at a time, noting how I kept my sleeves pulled down in a warm apartment, and how oddly specific Trevor was about the condo having a clean title with no shared claims. When he asked if I was really okay while Trevor stepped out, I panicked and told him I was just tired from work. He said only, "I believe you for now," and that sentence sat heavy in my chest the entire drive home. The moment Weston left that night, Trevor turned on me instantly, accusing me of putting my uncle up to interrogating him. When I finally talked back and asked what he had really done for me, he backhanded me into a doorframe, then punched me hard in the ribs when I did not collapse the way he expected. Even doubled over in pain, I felt a strange, fierce clarity, a certainty that this was the very last time he would ever touch me. The next morning, Weston called insisting on lunch. No excuses, and when he saw my exposed arms outside my office, his face turned to granite, over diner coffee by the river. I told him everything from the first slap to the night before, and he listened in silence, his knuckles white against the table. That night, he had me pack a bag while Trevor was out. And while gathering my things, he found paperwork revealing a massive delinquent bank loan and a handwritten IOU to a man named Elias Caldwell, a name Weston recognized instantly as a dangerous underground lender. Trevor was drowning in gambling debt, and Weston spent that night making calls, confirming Trevor was not even the executive he claimed to be, and that his company was already investigating him for missing funds. The next morning, we went straight to urgent care to have my injuries formally documented, because without a medical report, the police have no teeth. By noon, we were standing at my own front door as Weston laid out the terms in a voice that left no room for negotiation. Trevor could fight, and Weston would make sure both the police and his company learned everything. Or he could sign the divorce papers without contest and stay away from me permanently. Broken and cornered, Trevor confessed to gambling away company money, agreed to the divorce, and begged me not to go to the police, a request I met with cold silence. Trevor's company found the missing funds and had him indicted for fraud. And at his criminal trial, the jury heard from my coworker, an expert on the cycle of abuse, and finally from me. When the guilty verdict came down with consecutive prison time, Trevor whispered that he was sorry. And I told him I did not carry anger anymore, but I would never forgive him, because he had chosen every part of what happened. The settlement gave me real financial security for the first time in years. I moved into a bright apartment downtown, returned to the career I loved, and rebuilt friendships I thought I had lost forever. Uncle Weston stayed close, launching his own consulting firm nearby, and one evening he told me that the most important moments in life never arrive on a convenient schedule. You simply have to act when they do. Months later, standing alone on a beach with nobody left to fear, I finally understood exactly what he meant. If this story moved you, make sure you are subscribed to the Revenge Tales, because the next story we bring you might just be even more unforgettable than this one. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end.